Today we're going to be looking at how to subtract negative fractions. To show this, we have a couple of examples that we're going to work through together here, so let's get started. For question number 1, we're being asked to subtract 1/2 from negative 2/8. And as we can see up top here highlighted in yellow, whenever we're subtracting negative fractions that have different denominators, the first thing we need to do is we need to find a common denominator. And to do this, we're going to multiply our denominators in order to find a common denominator. And when we multiply 8 times 2, we get 16. So down below, we're going to rewrite these fractions for our next step with the common denominator of 16. But when we're rewriting these fractions, we need to make sure that we keep them equivalent by doing the same thing to our numerator up top that we had to do to our denominator in order to get the denominator of 16. For the first fraction, we had to multiply 8 times 2 to get 16, so we're going to do the same thing to our numerator up top. And when we multiply negative 2 times 2, we get negative 4. Now for the second fraction, we had to multiply the denominator of 2 by 8 in order to get 16, so we're going to do the same thing to our numerator up top. When we multiply 1 times 8, we get 8. And now we're ready to actually start subtracting these fractions. But just like when we're subtracting integers, we're going to subtract this by adding the opposite. So we're going to be adding the opposite of 8/16. And the opposite of 8/16 is negative 8/16. So now we're just going to add the opposite. So we're going to add our denominators. Well, that's going to stay the same. They're still going to be in 16ths. And then we can add our numerators. And when we add negative 4 plus negative 8, we get negative 12 for the fraction of negative 12/16. Now we can simplify this fraction here because both negative 12 and 16 are multiples of 4, so we're going to divide both our denominator and our numerator by 4 in order to simplify this fraction. Well, for the denominator, when we divide 16 by 4, we're left with 4, and then for the numerator, when we divide negative 12 by 4, we get negative 3, giving us the fraction of negative 3/4. So when we subtract 1/2 from negative 2/8, we get the fraction of negative 3/4 when written in its lowest possible terms. Now moving on to question number 2, where this time we're being asked to subtract negative 1/3 from negative 3/5. Clearly here we have two different denominators, so the first step is to find a common denominator. To do this, we're going to multiply our denominators. When we multiply 5 times 3, we get 15, so down below we're going to rewrite these fractions with the common denominator of 15. And we do need to make sure that we keep these fractions equivalent, meaning that we need to multiply our numerator up top by the same value that we multiplied our denominator by to get 15. So for the first fraction, we needed to multiply 5 times 3 to get 15, so we're going to do the same thing to our numerator up top. When we multiply negative 3 times 3, we get negative 9. Now moving on to the second fraction, we had to multiply the denominator of 3 by 5 in order to get 15, so we're going to do the same thing to our numerator up top. And when we multiply negative 1 times 5, we get negative 5. Now, just like when we're subtracting integers, we're going to accomplish this subtraction by adding the opposite. So the opposite of negative 5/15 is going to be 5/15. So we're just going to add these fractions now. And when we add fractions, the denominator's value is not going to change, so it's still going to be in 15ths, but we are adding a negative integer and a positive integer for the numerators. And when we're adding a positive onto a negative, we're going to be increasing in value the negative number. So we're going to be moving closer to 0. So when we add 5 onto negative 9, that's going to give us negative 4 for the fraction of negative 4/15. And since there's no common factor between negative 4 and 15 other than 1, we're done. We've already written this fraction in its lowest possible form. So when we subtract negative 1/3 from negative 3/5, we get negative 4/15 when written in its lowest possible terms. So hopefully by now you understand how to subtract negative fractions. Help make math less complicated by smashing those like and subscribe buttons. As always, enjoy today's math journey.